you all enjoyed lunch. I know we've got some people still trickling in, and I'm not going to do much talking here. Mostly I'm just going to introduce the two folks who are about to speak. Dave Hart and Shelley Knuth. They're both part of the NAIRR Pilot operations teams. And as we promised, they're going to be sharing some metrics on participation in different aspects of the NAIRR Pilot resource program. And so I'll hand it to them, and then that way you'll have information that you need to inform some of the input birds of a feather breakouts that we have right after this. So I'll come back up with some instructions for that after we hear from Dave and Shelley. All right.
Thanks, Lauren. So, hello, my name is Dave Hart. I am with Internet 2, but I've been working on the NAIRR Pilot for the past 2 years, and we wanted to talk today just about how far we've come. We've heard a lot of great examples of the kind of work that the NAIRR Pilot has enabled, and we're here to provide some broader context and the big picture of all the different activities that have undergone and how the broader community has taken advantage of and benefited from the NAIRR Pilot. So the first part, I'm going to cover about all the resources and allocations activity that the NAIRR Pilot has seen, the process of making those allocations, the resource choices, and what kind of projects have been undertaken from a global perspective. And then Shelley's going to talk to you about all the engagement activities, what the user community has told us about their AI readiness and what they need from the NAIRR Pilot. So to start, this is 2 years in. We started the NAIRR Pilot with 6 resources. There are now more than 50 available to researchers, right? Almost 40 federal agency systems from 14 providers, plus 18 private sector partners and their resources. Most are available for research projects. There's some classroom, startup, and deep partnership options. And then let's not forget, there's a bunch of non-allocated resources out there as well. 4 different agencies are providing courses, documentation, and AI models. There are 21 data sets available from 6 different agencies and also a number of community data sets. That last set of resources does not require any allocations effort. Go to the website. You can access all of those. A quick recap of the 2-year timeline, right? January 24th, 2024 was the day we started this. We launched the call for early allocations, and we recovered from that enough to open it up for NAIRR Pilot and NAIRR Classroom allocations by May. And following that, that's when the open data models and tools came along. Then the NAIRR demonstration project started in November of 2024. We had our 500th NAIRR Pilot proposal submitted by the end of the year, by December 30th. And then in 2025, NAIRR expansion projects started rolling out, deep partnerships happened, community data sets were added to the portal, and by the end of the year, 1,000 requests had been received. And then earlier this year, the sandbox projects became available in the NAIRR portal. So, quick word before I jump into all the data about allocations, but I wanted to reiterate the availability of these other NAIRR Pilot contributions, right? The data, models, and more. Hundreds of people every month are going to this website, looking at these models, downloading them, accessing them, using them in their research. NAIRR demonstration projects are described on the website. If you go there, these are research projects that engaged researchers, AI experts, and cyber infrastructure professionals, and many of them offer collaboration opportunities or services, and you can read about them on the website. So please do check them out, see if they're available to you or useful to you in your work. NAIRR expansion projects were focused on outreach and engagement with teams of educators and researchers involved. And there are still opportunities out there potentially for your kind of institution, your geographic region, or your particular resource needs. So definitely go check those out as well. Contact information is available, so you may be able to reach out and see how you might be able to leverage those opportunities as well. Now, moving on to where I'm most well versed, and that's in the allocations activity. So a lot of these charts, if you were here last year, you might have seen some things that looked familiar. But now we have 2 years of data to look at. So here, this is the proposal activity we've seen. The 2 obvious spikes, the first early call, we received 160 proposals at the first deadline in March to try to fit onto 6 resources. That was a challenge. Right, since then we've seen a pretty steady stream of incoming proposals. The obvious other spike is when deep partnerships were announced. There was great interest in that opportunity, and so you saw a lot of activity in that particular month. And since then it's stabilized again around between 20 and 40 proposals per month pretty steadily. This is actually how we got proposals out the door, or awards out the door for allocation. So this starts in April. Our first awards came out in April of 2024. We worked really hard trying to refine the process, and by the end of the year, you can see those two giant spikes. We got a lot of proposals out the door. We spent a lot of the year catching up. It was challenging, and it required us to bring more resources into the pilot to actually get those allocations out the door, which is what took us so long. The other point to highlight here is if you look in January and February of this year, we've already made some of the allocation awards that were submitted. So in some cases, we're able to move relatively quickly. In fact, February shows good activity there, given that the deadline would have been February 15th. So within a few weeks, some projects are already moving forward. This shows what it's taken us to get reviews done, right? The really wide swings in the red bar is about near classroom allocations. It took us a while to get those dialed in. They were infrequent, and we kind of had trouble keeping those our eye on the prize there. But if you can see in the last 6 to 8 months, we've got classroom allocations dialed in. Within a couple of weeks, we usually get those out the door and assigned to resources. And while there's some variation, you can see that the NAIRR Pilot allocations have been taking about 3 months over time to get out the door. And keep in mind, the process involves review by community members. It takes review by the resource providers and so forth. So there is a process that involves volunteers from the community as well. But we are working on it and continue to work to get that number down. And you can see some decline more recent months, but those are also more recently submitted, so don't read too much into the more recent months there. So moving on a little bit to what were all these resources asking for? That we've made about 800 different resource allocations, and that's because some projects ask for more than one resource and are awarded more than one resource. But 80%, almost 80% have been basically on GPU resources or cloud resources, and primarily the commercial cloud, but also Jetstream as well. Another 10% have been asking for access to private sector models. And then the last 12%, you can see I expanded that there into AI platforms, AI hardware, some CPU resources, and some collaboration opportunities. So that's what's been interesting to me. There's been a lot of focus on GPUs and clouds. So I think there's a lot of comfort zone kind of situation here, where they're comfortable with GPUs, they're comfortable with the cloud environments, and those are the resources that tend to get a lot of attention. But there are some great opportunities if you're interested in trying different platforms available or different AI bespoke hardware from the private sector partners. So please don't forget if you want to look for those in your research, please approach those private sector partners. Okay, so this chart looks a lot like the one I just showed you, and you're thinking, Dave, is this the same chart? Like, no, this one's green. But in fact, what this shows, it is very similar, because what this is showing is based on when a project was awarded, how many projects have actually been using a resource. And the reason it looks familiar is most projects eventually will start using the resources, which is good. It sometimes takes a little more time to get started, but ultimately most projects still make use of the resources eventually. And keep in mind, not every resource provides us with usage data. So this is only the projects that provide us usage data. And I also want to point out, like in January and February, these projects just got awarded and they're already making use of resources. So it is possible to move quickly, but it's often up to the readiness of the research team and the responsiveness of the resource providers. But in general, things are moving much more smoothly in terms of our researchers using the resources. And this may make more sense. And I think last year we presented this data in early February. So we only had the data up to January of 2025. And the numbers were growing rather slowly in terms of how many projects are actually making use of these resources. And you can see that now we've got gotten 2 years under our belts, things have improved. Now, on average, about 200 different projects are actually recording usage on these resources every month, which is great. And that's not every project uses something every month. Some people have to take time to analyze what their results were, do some workflow rearrangement, so forth. So you don't expect every project to run every month, but seeing this kind of steady state is really what we were looking for early on, and it's good to see that that's happened over time. Now, next I'll move on again to where are these people coming from. I'll just highlight here the NAIRR portal has a great map of all the projects that have been awarded along with the demonstration and expansion projects. So you can go there, dig into what's happening in your state or what looks like maybe where your institution is. Go there, check it out. You can see who else is in your neighborhood using these resources. And for the most part, I think almost every state is now represented. If you count all the expansion and demonstration projects, allocations have been made to almost every state at this point. And not surprisingly, what kind of organizations have used it? Mostly R1 universities. And that's just consistent with their research mission and research objectives. We welcome proposals from non-R1 institutions and nonprofits and FFRDCs and agency researchers, and they have come in and we have made those awards. 222 different institutions have received awards, many again R1s, but also quite a few other institutions. So it is broadly reaching the community, and we're still working. And I'm sure Shelley will talk more about reaching other kinds of institutions. Now, the last part I wanted to talk about was what kind of work was happening on these. And we've heard a lot of specific examples, and I said, well, maybe we can get a nice pie chart of what the domains are. And I pulled the data from our system and looked, and it turns out if I analyze the field of science that you reported in your submissions, you're doing AI research, which, you know, good job. And that means we did our job because that should have been the case, but it wasn't really informative. Right? Most everyone listed AI as their primary domain. So I did what, you know, an AI group should do, and I gave the project descriptions, the abstracts, and the titles, which are publicly available, so I wasn't you know, revealing anything secret, to an LLM and said, tell me what they're doing. And after I corrected it and say, no, don't stop looking at the field of science, I already did that, it went back and said, oh, I'll try again with what I can find. And this was, I thought, an interesting result. Now, the numbers here, there's more numbers than projects because projects may fall into multiple categories, which makes total sense. But almost everybody is doing something related to foundation model development and efficiency. We have about 700 projects, and here you are, 658 are doing something with a foundation model. Again, not super surprising. The next is more interesting. By far, the most active domain area is biomedical and health sciences. This includes, you know, RNA, mRNA work like we heard about this week, cellular biology, everything like that. So quite a few in that space. Education and workforce development, very popular as well, which is great. And then you go down the list and you see the other kinds of activities: safety, trust, and reliability, natural language processing, infrastructure, sustainability, so forth. The next domain, though, is way down there. Physical sciences and engineering is about less than half of what's seen for biomedical sciences, and then social science and earth sciences are next, with autonomous systems down at the bottom. So I thought it was an interesting perspective of what's happening in the proposals. And then looking at this, I said, I bet we should double check and make sure that we're supporting the focus areas of the NAIRR pilot. And I asked the LLM the same question. Tell me how these line up with the pilot focus areas. And so here we go. We saw training an AI savvy workforce. That was great, right? That was one of the focus areas. A lot of people are doing that. That's tremendous. Advancing AI methods, great. Creating open source AI tools, again, wonderful. And so I think this not only says that you all and the community was reading the instructions, which is tremendous, we were also doing our job in making sure they lined up with those focus areas. So that's great. But the last two here are much less well represented, so integrating simulations in AI, as well as applying AI to sensitive data. Those were less well represented, but I think it's also because they were much more focused focus areas, if you will. Integrating simulations in AI is a very specific requirement or a very specific description, sorry. And same as applying AI to sensitive data. That one we've noticed is a bit of more of a challenge for this part of the NAIRR pilot because obviously this isn't NAIRR secure, right? We didn't have a lot of resource providers in this part of the NAIRR pilot able to deal with sensitive data. So much of that activity probably happened under NAIRR secure rather than within the NAIRR pilot that we were dealing with. So, but some still did. Okay, and then before I let Shelley go, I have one last slide and just say, you've heard about the operations teams. This is most of them, and some are on Shelley's slides, so not everybody is represented here. But there are a lot of people that took a lot of time to make all this happen. Wanted to make sure they all got their credit. And for those of you who are on these teams, you'll notice some things maybe a little bit out of date. There's some people who have moved off the project over time, but I want to make sure they got their share of credit. But also maybe let you all know, maybe it's time to go update the lists and make sure they're current. Probably a good thing to do every once in a while. But anyway, thanks to all those people who I've worked with and we've all worked together with. It's been a pleasure over the last 2 years. So I think we've done a tremendous job and we're continuing to do that work. With that, I am going to turn it over to Shelley.
Should have tested how to work this thing before I got here. Hi, I'm Shelley Knuth. I am from the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I am here to talk to you today about what the NAIRR pilot has been showing us and what kind of impact that we've been able to have, but from the user engagement side. So Dave just talked about a lot of the computational resources and how folks were using that. And I just want to make clear that the portion that I'll be talking about is more on trainings and things along those lines. And so you can use both of our metrics as a great way to look at the impact that we are having. So before we go any further, the real work's done by all the folks that are listed here, and I want to acknowledge a few, in particular Alana Romanella, who's deputy director. She is the reason why this whole thing works. So, and Layla Freeborn, who's also here, who I know many of you have interacted with. And I also want to acknowledge Marisa Brazil and Nitin Sukija, who are on our user engagement working group and have really helped bring all of these components together in terms of, providing advice on where we need to go to help support the users. And we have so many more folks on here that are handling so much that I want to make sure that we acknowledge them. So NAIRR, there's a lot of components of NAIRR and a lot of things that have been going into all of this. And Dave had a great slide with all of these different operational teams. For our team, which was the user engagement team, we were really focused on those end users, those researchers and educators. What's working for them and what isn't working for them? And what are they doing with the resources, whether they're computational or data sets or informational like trainings and workshops? What are they doing with that information and how can we help further support them? And our role, as many of us on the operations side of things, was actually twofold. We had our literal operations part where we were answering tickets, we were doing the things to make sure that NAIRR was up and running, and then we also had the advisory part where we were taking a look at all of the things that were happening and reacting to them and making adjustments as we move forward. So some of the things that the user engagement team did, I have listed out here, and this is what we're going to see statistics on here in the next few slides. We hosted several national and regional workshops, and we have a few that are coming up, so I will share those near the end. We have had and we are currently having webinars that happen pretty frequently that anybody is welcome to join. We have a YouTube channel. We're like the kids. We're young and we're hip, and we have a YouTube handle, and I'll show that later. We've done interviews with users. We've gone to them and said, what are some things that are impactful for you? What could help you further whatever challenges you might be having? We've done a lot of surveys, and if anybody in this room's ever done a survey, you're super excited if you get maybe 30 people that respond to your survey. Well, we've had well over 1,000. So I feel pretty confident in what we're seeing from the community. And then, as I mentioned, we're also providing the operational support. So just to kind of lay out some of the workshops that we've been having. So, and kind of even step back from there, we said early on in the pilot, the user engagement working group said, you know, we put out some surveys to ask some questions about what people think that they might need, what do they want to learn, because we can make guesses, but we don't necessarily know. Why not ask the people what it is that they want? And from these surveys, we said, you know, the working group recommendation is that we really should be doing workshops, and we wanted to bring folks together. We could have done them online. We kind of went back and forth on that, and some of these were hybrid, but ultimately we wanted to bring folks together. So the very first one we did was about a year ago in April, and it was in Denver, Colorado. Who was at that workshop in the room? Yeah, awesome. So there's a handful of you, and I'm actually excited to see that not most of the hands in this room went up, because that means that we're also able to reach other folks across the community. So that one, we had about 768 applications to attend. We were only able to have about 225 folks, and then we had roughly 80 on top of that to help support it. And then we had a virtual component, super successful workshop. People were very happy to have the connection points with folks from other disciplines. It was a really fantastic event. And also from all of this, we said, okay, well, so part of this effort, in fact, all of this effort, I should say, is funded through our Access Support Grant. And part of our goals there have been, in years 4 and 5 of that grant, is to make sure that we are connecting the regional consortiums to the national level of, you know, resources like Access. And so it was a natural fit, and the surveys were telling us this as well, to do some of these things regionally. So we also did regional workshops. We've done 3 to date. The first was part of the Rocky Mountain Advanced Computing Consortium, or RMAC, which is a consortium of about 10 states in the Rocky Mountain region, about 40 institutions that cover R1s, community colleges, national labs, all R2s, all kinds of folks. And we did that at the University of Colorado in Boulder in August. We did one at the University of Kentucky in October, and then we did one at University of Southern California in January, which Eva Dielman, who's also here, her group hosted. And each of those workshops the agendas were tailored based on the applications that we were getting in. So folks would apply, and we would ask them, you know, what are you interested in? And we would take that, and then we would tailor the workshops to what the folks needed. The regional ones were much smaller than our national one. We had about 75 participants and roughly 20 to 25 folks who were there supporting it. Coming up, we have one next month at The Ohio State University in April. Yes, you have to say the. And that one, the applications have closed. It's, you know, they're well in the process of getting that off the ground. And then we have one coming up in June, and this is going to be another national one. The in-person applications have closed, but we've had so much interest to date. We've opened it up for virtual as well, and I'll have something at the very end where you can apply. Again, tremendous interest. There's been a lot of partnerships. We've been able to partner with a lot of the resource providers in the community. We've been able to partner with industry folks to help provide some really great talks at all of these workshops, and it's been really great. So what have we learned so far? Well, interest is certainly not the limiting factor in meaningful adoption. People are very interested in NAIRR. They're very interested in accessing resources, whether, again, they're computational or informational. That is not any kind of challenge for folks. What can be a challenge for some folks as they're looking to use AI tools in their research and education are navigating some of the complexities of the ecosystem. So for example, what tools are the right ones for them to be using for their needs? Is this the right one for me to be using in this domain for this particular application? And because there's a lot of tools out there, so which one is the right one? A lot of people really want to know how to use AI in their research. If they are from a specific domain science, they want to know what their peers are using and how they can use it, because they want to maintain research competitiveness in their fields. And then there were a lot of people who are teaching and wanting to figure out, what's the best tools to use to reach my students? How do I make sure that they aren't cheating? How, all of those kinds of things. And we've also learned, and I think this is universal across the pilot, this is a new set of folks who are coming to our community. A lot of us that were in the operations teams, we're part of the high-performance computing community. And we certainly see a lot of high-performance computing folks that have come in, but we're seeing folks from all disciplines who have never seen a high-performance computing system, and they don't quite know what to do with it, and they may or may not want to continue on that path. And so how do we reach those folks? How do we speak to them in a language that brings them in and allows them to want to stay? So I really hope you guys can see that slide. So this is a great slide that Jason Armbruster on my team put together. And again, this is a little bit different from what Dave just showed about the allocations and where folks are getting requests. This is about user engagement. So who's coming to our workshops? Who's been participating in webinars? Who's been, where are they coming from when they're viewing our YouTube channel? And if you can make the numbers out on there, one of the things, there's a couple of things that are really interesting from this plot. And one of them is that there's broad adoption from folks across the entire country. We have people who have engaged with us from every state, from DC, from Puerto Rico. And they're not small numbers, and the top number is unique users, and the bottom one is total engagements. So, and we'll have a total on the next slide here. But the other thing I want you to pick out from this is that in those places where we held those regional workshops, so that was Colorado, Kentucky, and California, you can see how those areas, those have the highest engagements across the country. And initially when I saw this, I said, well, okay, that's because we were there, right? That's, this is sort of fabricated, but when you dig into it, that's not it. It's because these regional workshops are serving as amplifiers for their local and regional communities that are then consuming the information that's coming to them because they're learning about it from folks that they know. And so this really shows that regional coordination can have a heavy impact on the national scale. If we take a look at the engagement summary, so this is where we see the totals of those numbers. We have almost 3,000 unique users and just over 5,200 total users or total interactions. And what we can see here is that this is showing us how people are entering and interacting with the pilot across that same period that we saw from the geographic perspective. And really what I want you to take away from this is that there is no single entry point for folks to come into NAIRR. So when we're looking to bring more people to the NAIRR community, there's a lot of different ways that they're doing that. They're doing that with the workshops, they're doing that with the webinars, they're doing that with operational mechanisms like tickets and things like that. And this really matters because when you have multiple pathways for people to engage, then that means that the project is more sustainable and unless you were having just, the only way that people were interacting with us was through workshops or something like that. If we look at institution type, at the top there are R1s and then R2s and R3s. So R1s, we see, have a heavy engagement, but we do see a pretty good mix of folks from, again, R2s, R3s. We have folks from community colleges, national labs, industry, nonprofits. And what's kind of interesting about what we see here is that Again, this participation extends beyond just, our traditional R1s, even if that's where the focus is. But what matters is that we're reaching other institutions. We do have more work to reach, at mass some of the other folks, but we're still, we're only 2 years in on this, and it's still something that we're working on. But I think this is really great because it's showing that we're reaching out to many of the other groups across the country. And then this particular slide is showing how those different types of institutions are engaging with NAIRR. So are they mostly responding or engaging by submitting tickets? Are they mostly engaging through trainings or workshops or what have you? And what we see is that the research-intensive institutions tend to engage more through direct access to the advanced resources that Dave was talking about earlier, whereas other institutional types tend to, and the research-intensive ones also work with us through trainings and things like that, but the other institutions more primarily do that, which isn't necessarily an unexpected result. It's something that I would expect to see. So a couple of things real quick. So this is a slide showing just an example of how this is being consumed and the workshops that we're doing, how they're landing with folks. Because it's one thing to say, well, we think we should do workshops and people are applying, and then it's another thing to find out if they're actually working. This is just from the first national AI Unlocked workshop that we did a year ago in Denver, but this is pretty much what we see consistently. The pie graph there is, would you recommend a workshop to anyone that's similar to this in the future? We had 99.4%. There was one person who said they wanted it, and I don't know, I'm just saying. But the other ones actually have been all showing 100% of folks who are recommending it, which is interesting. And then the bottom graph is saying what, on a scale from 1 to 5, how would you rate the quality of this workshop? And so you can see that most folks, in fact, it was well over, I think 93%, are saying that they would rate the workshops as a 4 or a 5. And then we also, I mentioned, we did surveys, and we've done surveys in all kinds of different spaces. We've sent out surveys. We've been hosting things like researcher showcases, and we survey people during that. When we send out applications, application requests for the workshops and whatnot, people will respond with based on questions. So we have a lot of data. And what I want to show here is just a couple of bits of that. So the top graph there, we asked people, what's your biggest challenge with AI? And then on the bottom, we asked which AI topics interest you. And this is just really reflective of what we're seeing in general, that and the things that I've mentioned, that people are, they're worried about the fact that there's so many tools and they're not quite sure, which ones are the ones that they want to use. And then looking at needing some help and wanting to use this more in research. And then the bottom one is which AI topics interest you. The top item there is large language models, and then below that is AI for research, and then we see below that is information on the NAIRR proposal process. So, what this all is telling us is that people are really wanting to understand how to use the resources, and they don't necessarily have that knowledge, and they want to learn more about it. And then finally, here's the promised slide of things. So on the left-hand side is a QR code for upcoming events. That's a webpage. It's at nairrpilot.org, and you can go ahead and see what's coming up. It's regularly updated, so it's not out of date. In the middle, because this came up yesterday, we do have a Slack channel. So if you want to join our Slack channel, we have like 400 people on there. This is going to send you to a Google form in case you get a little bit freaked out about that. And we're just asking you to put your email address in so that we'll add you to the Slack channel instance. And And on the far right is the AI Unlocked workshop that's happening, coming up in June. As I mentioned, we have virtual options that are available. And then at the very top is our Cool Kids YouTube handle, where you can see all of the past webinars that we've done and view the videos. And I think that's what I have, so thank you. And I think we're ready to take questions.
Thank you. Like Empire AI that exists in my state. Now this is too loud, sorry. Yeah.
Can you start with the sentence over again?
Yeah. So my question is about the opportunity to have an interaction between the NAIRR and state-level AI infrastructures, specifically to make it so that we have more on-the-ground interaction, right? So I think that, we ran a small workshop in November, and we're about to publish a report that was specifically about, what could these interfaces be between the NAIRR and Empire AI in New York State. And I would just love for you all to comment whether you're thinking about it, and also to offer just that there's a lot of enthusiasm from our end to broker that conversation.
Absolutely. I think we need the microphones on at the tables. Hello. Oh, this will work too. So yes, we absolutely have thought about that. The way that we've looked at this is that we wanted to test out the regional workshop idea because we didn't know if it was going to take off or not. So we had planned to do these 3 regional in these particular regions. We're going with the national one here, and then once we get over that, we're looking into, can we partner with other folks across the country to do regional workshops in other locations? And so that could be state cyber infrastructure groups, as you mentioned. That could be other folks as well, and it's mostly going to depend on funding. I didn't mention this, but it's pretty important. We fund everybody to come and attend, so we pay for their travel, and that's important for folks who can't afford that.
Yeah. Sorry, just to follow up very quickly. So Empire AI is not a state cyber infrastructure group, right?
Right.
It's an actual cyber infrastructure being built by New York State.
Yeah,
so,
understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I not understand the question, or I want to make sure I answered your question.
Yeah, I don't think that the NAIRR should be paying for all of this, right? The question is more about how are we thinking strategically about interfacing with state-level efforts, and are we? Because there is an upside, clearly.
Yeah. No, okay. Yeah, I guess where I'm coming from is this is our operational way of doing it, and I think absolutely the powers that be that are higher up than I am are thinking about those connection points. But from an operational perspective, what I can do in the next year or so is hopefully to support those events that are happening across the country in collaboration. Thank you.
All right, Sean Cleveland, University of Hawaii. Question about NAIRR's outreach and looking at EPSCoR jurisdictions. As classically, EPSCoR, the jurisdictions are usually under-resourced in cyber infrastructure, and AI is no exception. And when you look at some of the maps and things, you see fewer participants out of those jurisdictions. So is there any ideas or plans to partner more with some of the EPSCoR programs or increase some of the outreach to some of those jurisdictions?
The answer, I think, is yes, and in fact, I think the NAIRR Expansion Awards address that specifically. So I encourage you to go to the website and look at the NAIRR Expansion Awards that have EPSCoR and other jurisdictions represented just for that purpose.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's thank Dave and Shelley one more time.